Okay, in this set of lectures, I'm going to talk through meditation 3, and then we're going to move a bit more quickly through the rest of the meditations. Descartes begins meditation 3 confident that he knows the cogito, so he has that as a foundation now, but he doesn't know anything else. And so he takes a couple of stabs at trying to reconstruct his beliefs on the basis or from the basis of the cogito. And in doing that, he describes some aspects of a strategy that is actually going to be his strategy from this point until the end of the meditations. It's worth mentioning that strategy now, even though Descartes doesn't give perhaps quite as much detail as I will give when at least in meditation 3, he doesn't give as much detail as I'll give now when I sort of give you the spoiler about where he's going. But it will give us a framework to think about the arguments in each of the meditations leading up to the end, because you'll be able to see those arguments as playing a role in, again, reconstructing the whole system of belief in the way that Descartes thinks it should be constructed, with the cogito as the basis, and then some other beliefs sort of in leading up, in a way, building up to back to knowledge of things that we, some of the things we believed before we began the process of doubt in meditation 1. And this strategy is as follows. Descartes says that he would really like to be able to trust his reasoning, and he'd also like to be able to believe that the objects that appear to be part of a world outside of him, tables, chairs, animals, people, things that he perceives that seem to be part of a real external world. He'd like to believe that those are real things, that there really is an external world that he can know, and that he can have accurate beliefs about. But at this point in the meditations, he only has reasons to doubt these things. He hasn't seen any secure foundation on which to believe in either his own reasoning or in his senses. So what he needs is something that can provide that justification, that can give him confidence again in believing in his reasoning and in his senses. And that thing is God. If there is a good God, not an evil demon, not an evil genius God that is deceiving him all the time, but if there's a good God, if he can actually determine or demonstrate or come to know for certain that there is a God who is well-intentioned, then that can provide support for his trust in his own reasoning and in his senses. Why would that be? Well, as Descartes will clarify in meditation 4, which we haven't read yet, but when we get there, he'll mention this. If there is a good God, then this God won't deceive him about everything that he believes. This God won't make it unfair for him in deciding what to believe and not to believe on the basis of evidence. So it's not, this good God is not going to justify all of our reasoning, but he's going to justify our reasoning if we carry out that reasoning in a careful way. This God is not going to justify everything we experience by the senses, but this God will justify everything that is experienced by the senses if it is explored by us and examined by us and questioned by us thoroughly. That is, if we approach the information we get from our senses in the right way, in a critical way, in a way that that aims to only believe what we actually have good reason to believe. Okay, so the basic idea here is that if there's a good God, then this God will must reward us for carrying out the project of trying to figure things out in a responsible way. If we try to understand the world, get information about the world in a responsible way, then this God is not going to deceive us about the world. So if we can prove that there's a good God, then we can be confident in our reasoning and our senses within certain limits. So that's going to be the strategy. And in Meditation 3, Descartes goes on, after he's sort of very sketchily described this strategy of what he's trying to do. He's basically he's going to now examine his ideas that he has available to him from the standpoint of just knowing the cogito and of doubting everything he possibly can. He's going to examine the ideas that are available to him in his own mind as part of the cogito, okay? Or as part of what he experiences just as a thinking thing. He's going to examine his ideas. And from there, he's going to come up with an argument that there must be a God. And not just any God, but a good God. A God that can guarantee the trustworthiness of his reasoning and his senses if those things are used responsibly, as I put it before. So what we get next is an argument that God exists, and that's what the rest of the Meditation 3 is concerned with, is proving that this God exists. So if Descartes is successful here, then by the end of Meditation 3, we will know two things for certain. We'll know, each one of us will know, okay, I myself exist as a thinking thing, and each one of us will know a God exists, this God being all-powerful, all-good, and existing outside of ourselves. And again, so that's what Descartes is going to try to prove by the end of Meditation 3. This argument, the argument for the existence of God by Descartes in Meditation 3, is very controversial. A lot of people don't buy it. That's true about the cogito as well, but the argument for the existence of God is even more controversial than the cogito. In other words, probably more people get off of the Descartes train here than get off of the Descartes train at the cogito. Okay, a lot of people follow Descartes with the cogito, but then they get off the Descartes train with the proof for the existence of God, because they have various reasons for thinking it's not successful. So I challenge you, or invite you, of course, to be critical in here when you hear this argument, or when you and when you read this argument in Meditation 3, and ask yourself, whether or not you think it's a convincing argument, whether or not you think this argument does demonstrate that God exists. And of course, if you think it's not successful, you should try to keep track of what are your main reasons for thinking it's not successful. Why do you think it fails? Descartes is completely convinced by it, and he thinks that it should be convincing. So if you think that it's not convincing, keep track of your own objections. Keep track of what your main objection or objections are to the argument for the existence of God. You may need those as well, in the course. We may discuss this issue further. Descartes himself considers a number of objections at the end of Meditation 3. And so if you're looking for some inspiration for ways to challenge the argument, he himself considers some possible ways to challenge the argument. But of course, he's not convinced by any of the objections, and he gives his own replies to those objections within Meditation 3. After he presents the objections, he gives his own explanation as to why he doesn't find any of those objections devastating for his argument.